Yeah, sure. Flag on the rainbow.
It's what
Okay,
we've
so
used
I
in
thought-
our
Hold on just a second. It's weird. It won't let me
So
do
good
it.
morning, everyone. This morning's meeting, we just have one item of business, which is the nomination of a candidate for the NISBA Area 11 Director. I guess at this point, there are three candidates. One is Charmise Desiree of Uniondale, Margaret Marchand of Locust Valley, and Mark Camberg of East Williston. So I guess at this point, since there are three candidates, we'll open the floor for nominations and then vote upon that. Does that sound?
I don't think it's nomination, I think we just need to pick which one.
I'm sorry, just.
I don't know, I'm
You
asking.
nominate whoever you
Yeah.
want and then well, I guess at the end, tally votes.
Or
So.
we could have discussion first if the board chooses.
Yeah, I mean, I've done my research. I mean, I think my preference for nomination would be Charmise from Uniondale.
I believe I heard someplace that Styles had voted for her last night.
I think we will vote for her. Yeah, you're correct.
Okay, I mean, as, you know, I had sent out some information, I think that,
And thank you for doing so,
Yeah.
Sam.
Appreciate
was
that.
helpful.
That was helpful.
I think that really from, I think our initial thoughts, and I think Dr. Fresh confirmed that the choice was really between Ms. Desiree and Ms. Marchand. And in thinking about that, I just love to walk through, and I know we're trying to do this
Sure.
as succinctly, the reasons for Ms. Desiree versus Ms. Marchand. What's the
My-
thinking behind that?
My personal thinking behind that is Ms. Desiree has experience. She's already served on committees and served, I believe, as what, Secretary and Treasurer for New York State School Boards. I believe that was.
That's been for 2 months, I think that's been
All right,
since
but
July.
she.
Oh, no, absolutely,
And she's
absolutely.
experienced. She's a past president of a school board. You know, I think Ms. Marchand has a similarly impressive CV. I think just, you know, given the level of detail and experience, you know, my preference at this time would be to go with Ms. Desiree.
Okay, and to take the other side of it, and then just,
Yeah, do you mind if I just,
Go
I'm
ahead,
just gonna,
you can
just to
shoot
share,
off
because I
my
didn't print it out, but.
I think one of the issues for what NISBA is for, from my conversations with them both on the phone over the last 2 years and in person, is to represent school boards at the New York State level. And I think one of the most important parts about that is to have a representative whose district or whose priorities is gonna be, are consistent with what Jericho's looking for. And that's why when I put some of this information together, I think it was sort of, in my mind, more definitive that the Jericho School District has a lot more in common with the Locust Valley School District from what we need from the state and what we would like from the state than does the Uniondale School District. And not having, able to get, you know, a strong, not really getting a lot of feedback on the individuals themselves, it was, Uniondale is a meaningfully larger school district with a meaningfully larger dependence upon state aid versus Locust Valley, which is a slightly smaller school district than us, but has similarly a very small dependence on state aid.
Right.
And so in terms of whether it's lobbying New York State to help all school districts equally, or helping larger school districts that may have more financial challenges, I think that Ms. Marchand would be much more effective at putting forward priorities that the Jericho School District has versus versus what a larger school district like Uniondale would have. And I would expect that regardless of who gets elected here, that they're gonna represent all school districts, and they will do a great job of representing Area 11 as the director. My always, you know, overriding concern is who's looking out for the Jericho School District, and I think Ms. Marchand's priorities are more consistent based on the information she sent us. And, you know, she sent us, and again, you may have other information, but she sent us, I think it was about 4 pages of information about it, whereas Ms. Desiree sent us basically, as you said, a brief bio about what she'd done, really not even outlining what her priorities are, other than there was something in one of the things where, you know, it's an advocate for, you know, certain communities, and really, that was my concern, and that's why I think my initial leaning walking into the room, and that's why I wanted to hear about it, was that Ms. Marchand is probably where I was leaning in terms of voting.
I think that's entirely reasonable, Sam. I just, again, I'm going just, first off, you know, irrespective of who we decide to nominate, if we decide to nominate somebody today, you know, their responsibility is to represent Area 11 and all the schools, you know, within that geographic zone within New York State School Boards. I'm going based on, you know, somebody who's experienced. I mean, I'm fairly certain that Ms. Marchand is new in her position as, president of the Locust Valley School Board.
She is.
Yeah. I think that's entirely reasonable, Sam. I just, again, I'm going just, first off, you know, irrespective of who we decide to nominate, if we decide to nominate somebody today, you know, their responsibility is to represent Area 11 and all the schools, you know, within that geographic zone within New York State School Boards. I'm going based on, you know, somebody who's experienced. I mean, I'm fairly certain that Ms. Marchand is new in her position as, president of the Locust Valley School Board.
She is.
Yeah. just, yeah, at this point, my preference. In the future, you know, obviously my opinion may change.
I just would like to say that I love the fact that Ms. Marchand is a tenured Syosset School District former teacher and special ed. I just think that speaks like loads to her dedication to education, and I would just like to add, and once again, I'm not sure out of the four of us, but I actually personally know Ms. Marchand. I've had many conversations with her in the past. I'm not sure if any of the other board members can say the same about Ms. Charmise or Ms. Marchand, but she's extremely passionate, extremely smart, extremely dedicated to currently being on the school board and her former role as being a teacher. And I just think that if I'm gonna vote for someone, I would really like to vote for someone I know personally, because, and I'm sure Ms. Charmise is wonderful. I don't know her personally. Of course, we're working off of a piece of paper, whether it's a bio that they sent or a few pages, but I guess once again, I'm just trying to say, out of all four of us, I think, am I the only one that knows Ms. Marchand personally?
I don't know any of the candidates personally.
Yeah, so-
I've met her.
Personally.
I'm not like friends with her, I just know her personally. I don't hang out with her, I don't, you know, nothing to that sort, so I just wanna put that out there. It's not as a conflict, but I know her, I've spoken to her, she's extremely smart, so I would really like to get all four of us to maybe just think about that for a second, and you know, let's not walk away today from being split, you know, Ms. Charmise, Ms. Marchand, yes, I'm sorry, so if we can come together with the sentiment that Ms. Marchand is extremely qualified, and she would do, I think, a wonderful job advocating. That's at the end of the day, that's gonna be their role, advocating, so she's gonna do a wonderful job, so I would really like to get all four of us behind that if it's possible.
I hear what you've both said. I think this position is, and to your point earlier, Sam, yes, I think we want somebody who's going to look out for the interests of our school district. And their district, yes, might be similar to ours, but her position is representative of 57 districts across Nassau County, so we need to keep that in mind. Number two, Ms. Desiree is the only one of these three candidates who's already had representation at the state level with NYSSBA-related roles. And then I think also importantly, that the person she's replacing, Mr. Schoen, actually endorsed Charmise Desiree for this role. So I think that we need to keep all those things in mind. And yes, while I may not know any of the candidates personally, I think those three things, you know, are very important and speak volumes to who she is as a person. And to say that, you know, I think that all of these people, by virtue of running for this role, are very passionate about school board governance and the welfare of children. So I think at the end of the day, I think that she seems to be the best candidate for this role.
Can I ask just two questions following up for that? One, what does representing 57 districts, I understand that she has to represent 57 districts, but as we've talked about, those 57 are quite different. And at times, those 57 districts, as we see when we have these resolution committee meetings, have completely different priorities. And so, like, I'm gonna be at this resolution, or be on the Zoom meeting for this resolution meeting, and I expect that districts are gonna vote very disparately. Like, there are some, out of those 57 districts, there's gonna be split votes.
They're gonna vote in line with their interests.
Right,
Yeah.
and so that's why I would love to have that director at the end of the day, to have someone who's more in line with our interests, recognizing that the person's gonna do their best to represent those 57 areas,
Right.
but there's clearly a difference between what X wants and Y wants in terms of districts, and why wouldn't we want one that was more
I
similar to us?
totally agree, but if you even look within Jericho, we're not a homogeneous district. We have very varied interests, varied needs. So I think somebody coming from a larger school district, and she represents the largest school district on that list.
Sure.
I think we want somebody who's going to look out for the interests of everybody. And have experience having worked in a very diverse district, and just have all those diverse interests at heart when representing us on the state level. That's just my thoughts on that.
Okay, I again, I think we just have it, we look at that differently, and then
Okay.
I guess the second point is, you know, Mr. Schoen's been in the position for 2+ decades or something like that. I don't have a relationship with them, I don't know if you do or you do. I have heard nothing particularly positive, nothing particularly negative. I actually believe in my dealings with NYSBA that NYSBA needs to become more of our supporter and more of a proponent for what we're trying to do, and I've heard people, I'm not gonna say that. I'm not necessarily sure how an endorsement or why, in my mind, an endorsement from the status quo or from someone who's been in that position for 25 years, it means a lot. I'm not saying that it doesn't mean anything. Not knowing B.A. Schoen's priorities, I'm not sure how you give a lot of credence to that in terms of not really knowing who he is, other than he's been a member of that for 2.5 decades.
I'm less dependent on the outgoing person in that position
Okay.
endorsing somebody. I think for me, it's just going off the bio again, not having ever met, not knowing these people or ever having met them.
Yeah, I just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You know, I'm just, at this point, for me, it's just really an objective decision. I think whoever ultimately is seated in this position, you know, has the responsibility of representing all districts. And, you know, yeah, are we more similar to Locust Valley than we are to Uniondale? Yes. That being said, based on size, based on, you know, reliance of state aid, you know,
Those are two big states.
no, with no question. But at the end of the day, that individual is just as responsible as representing, you know, the smallest school district or the school district that's most reliant on state aid as they are for the, you know, district that, you know, may have, you know, very different, you know, demographics or finances. For me, Miss Desiree was my choice based on, you know, her experience and based on her track record. Again, Ms. Marchand has a very impressive CV. I think, you know, in the future, she's gonna, at least for me, be somebody to consider for a position.
I mean, for the record, I know B.A. Schoen for 20 years. And again, to counter some of, you know, Sam's comments on him, he has been an active supporter of public education. Has been outspoken on several issues that ring true. And he has a pretty high profile both at state school boards and in Nassau County. And I just, you know, again, I'm not saying because he made an endorsement, all I'm saying is, for the record, he's a good guy who has serviced and represented Nassau County, in my mind, in a exemplary way for his period of time as a member of.
So what are some of those policies that he's been a big proponent of that have been in our interest?
Firstly, again, his, again, public education, issues with charter schools, issues, separation of church and state. I've heard him talk about state aid for Long Island, the unfair, the amount of money that is collected from Long Island that's sent to Albany that comes back. I think that probably would be the part that I would underline the most there.
But I think that's sort of the issue that, look, I would be hard pressed to believe that Mr. Canberg, Ms. Desiree, and Ms. Marchand are not gonna be proponents for state aid. It's a matter of who gets that state aid. I think Ms. Desiree, Mr. Canberg, and Ms. Marchand, I would be surprised, and it would be a sort of very big impediment if they weren't against having charter schools set up in districts like Jericho, the way someone tried to do, you know, about a decade ago now. And I'd be surprised if any of them were very much against the separation of church and state. So I think those three policies, it's very admirable that Mr. Schoen was in favor of those, but I think those are easy ones for anyone to get behind. I think the state aid one is to me one of the most important, given that we get, and Mr. Manuel, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we get a very small percentage of our budget for
We do,
about
but
$10 million.
But I will say, foundation aid has been a significant conversation piece for the last decade. And we finally, at this point this year, we are fully funded because of the activities of DISBA, of my association, of the Superintendent's Association. And that depended on the district, and it didn't matter whether you were wealthy or not wealthy if you were not fully funded at that point. we were one of the districts that were not fully funded. And that's why this year we increased the state aid by, I think, $2.7 million
Yeah,
from
from
the,
like
from the prior year.
8 to 10 or something.
And I'm sure Uniondale had a significant increase.
They did.
I'm not sure what Locust Valley or even some average districts such as Sachem from a wealth standpoint were already considered fully funded, so they got the minimal 2% or whatever it was, 3%. So that fully funding piece was significant for so many districts, including us, but not necessarily because of wealth or non-wealth. So I thought that was a big piece, and that was a fight for literally a decade.
Oh, no, I don't remember all the numbers offhand. I remember that Uniondale's did go up by 20%.
I'm sure,
Like that. It
I'm
went from
sure.
like 80s into 100.
But it was interesting to see a district like us that went up 20 or 30%, or, I know it's on a smaller number.
Sure.
But then you look at a Sachem, different level of wealth in that district, and they only received 2 or 3%.
Yeah, we promised it was gonna be a shortcut. I mean, like I said, I absolutely believe, and it's like when we talked about, even if you don't know everybody, and as Dr. Balachana and I agreed the other day, you still have to come up with a vote for somebody. And as I said, when you vote for somebody, I think you look for someone whose interests are most in line with yours. And I said the 2 parts there are, one, I think in her materials, Mrs. Marchand talked about local control and autonomy for school districts, and the similarity in state funding, whereas Ms. Desiree, I think, had, 35% or over $100 million of state aid, a large portion of the budget. And one of the things I saw where she talked about representing communities that not necessarily are gonna be consistent with what we're looking for. But I'm done and I'm ready to go. I don't know who else has something else to say.
I don't have anything else.
I don't have anything else. Were there any, I guess we have to vote on this before the public portion, or were there any emails about this issue? I didn't think so, okay. I guess then it's time
Oh,
to vote, I guess, all in favor?
wait, so we have to have at least 3 votes in favor of one person to do it. Okay, and how are we gonna run the vote now?
So I think like we did with the reorg, where we had multiple candidates for one, we just mentioned the candidate and we just took a vote.
Are we
That's
able
how
to
we
take a
did it.
second vote if we're not able to reach a vote on the first ballot?
Yes.
Yeah, so,
Yes.
yes, but are we making a motion now? What's the motion?
I guess we'll vote by candidate,
Okay.
so maybe,
We were able to have a second ballot.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Thank you.
So if this results in an impasse or a tie, we can then revote. Okay.
Absolutely.
okay. So, all in favor of Ms. Marchand? All opposed?
I thought we just did it as we voted for each
That's what
candidate.
I.
Yeah, so just so
Okay.
all in favor of Ms. Marchand,
Fine, so
And
you
then
got
all
2
in
for Ms.
full-
Marchand,
And all
yeah.
in favor of Ms. Desiree?
and
Right,
for
you know,
formality, we have to do Canterbury.
all in favor of, I'm sorry, all opposed to Ms. Desiree?
Well,
I think
Okay,
just
all
do
in
it,
favor.
just do it in
Just the
favor.
numbers, okay.
Just one.
All in favor of Mr. Camberg?
We agreed on something.
feel like
Yeah,
it's
we-
Simon's
Okay,
Well, we
for the
did.
part, we agreed on something. There we go, we're positive.
Okay, so it's 2-2, so
I
we're
say we have
at an
another 2-minute
impasse.
conversation and we see if we can reach resolution, if not.
Fine.
I just wanted, I don't wanna jump in when you guys were speaking, but, especially during COVID, a lot of issues came up with schools and one of the big things was, local control over, state control, and I think that's been a huge topic, for the past several years, and a lot, there's been a lot of chatter, nothing significant has happened, but there's been a lot of chatter. How can we ensure that schools have, local control? And I believe we even, we had a conversation, it was maybe 6 months ago, maybe more, but regarding disciplinary stuff that, the state wanted to pass, a legislation, not allowing, schools to, execute certain disciplinary actions, and that was like a big topic, but that's just one small piece of it. I just think that having Ms. Marchand advocate for being able to have schools have their own local control, make their own rules, run their districts the way they see fit, and each district really is so different. It doesn't matter just size, but there's different levels, right? I think Jericho is at the top of its game, and so we have our own priorities and we want to run it our own way. I just think that's such an important topic it's been circulating, and I don't know if somebody wants to chime in on that, but that's why I just really feel good about having Ms. Marchand in that seat.
I'll chime in. I mean, again, from what I've read, you know, the conversation on local control largely stemmed, at least initially, on mask mandates. And listen, that's a controversial subject. There's been a lot of opinion, arguments for, arguments against, and we can talk about science and conspiracy and all that. But listen, at the end of the day, you know, schools, the districts did what I think they thought was best practice at the time. Hindsight's always 20/20. I agree. I mean, local control is important, but as a public school, there's still going to be a lot of state influence, whether it's from the governor's office, Department of Education, or the Department of Health. I respect that. We should have local control to the extent that we can, but we're still going to be very much dependent upon guidance or downright policy from the state.
But
Yeah.
and once again, the point is that we want to keep it that way, right? We want to keep it as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Of course, there's always
Yeah.
going to be some kind of first of all, there's always state guidance. Usually, it's not like you have to. It's more like you should.
There's some guidance and there's some regulation.
Yeah, so we want to try to keep local control as much as possible, and Ms. Marchand, I know, has been a huge advocate of that, and there's been a lot of talk amongst New York State legislation of passing certain laws. Of course, a lot of this stuff is talk, but the fact that it kind of hovers over you and it kind of makes you nervous that if they do have some kind of overbearing on what Jericho does. And once again, we're talking about Jericho because that's our district.
Sure.
We have to be mindful of what's in Jericho's best interest. Once again, I think Ms. Marchand is going to be wonderful at advocating for us in Area 11. I really would like you guys to reconsider and get behind that. I know that Ms. Desiree has a very impressive CV, as you said, also, but at the end of the day, we have to choose one of the two great or three great that we
No,
have in front of
absolutely.
us.
I think in my opinion at least is I would still totally respecting what you're saying, and I think the work that all these candidates have done to the extent that I know of it has been positive, and I firmly believe that anybody who is even a candidate for this position has demonstrated their ability to do it. I just for me now I think I want to go with the more experienced individual who has a history of serving at the state level. But
I want to end this, and I think I don't believe that's. I think some people have made some very good points on for both candidates. I don't think the experience standpoint at the state level, given that that's been literally 3 months, and I think both of them. If we're looking for experience, then Mr. Camberg's the experienced person because he's been board president for over a decade. He's been on his board for 15 years, and as he talked about in his video, he has lots of connections with state legislators and government officials and things like that. So I agree, experience is important, but I think experience isn't the defining character. Otherwise we would have said Mr. Camberg. I think that also I am, and I don't like comments, so I'm always suspect of what's going on, that I don't know when Mr. Schoen knew he was retiring. I don't know when Mr. Schoen knew. Well, I guess Mr. Schoen sent something out in July about this.
that he wasn't going to
Yes,
see.
which is exactly when Ms. Desiree took over that position. So were those two things connected? I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that her experience in that position as Secretary Treasurer for the Nassau County Board has only been as long as she's been running for this position. So again, I discount that again because I look at that and say, yes, I think involvement is great. I think showing up is the first step to being effective. And look, at the end of the day, I think it's imperative that this district nominate somebody. And while I do not agree with the logic of the arguments that I've heard from Dr. Fresher, Dr. Balachandra, I think Jericho, as the top district here, needs to send in a vote for somebody. So if that's really where the two of your minds are, and
as I said, I don't think what you're saying is in the best interest of the Jericho School District, which is what we're elected to represent. I'm happy to vote for Ms. Desiree and give her a 3-1 victory, but for the record, I do not believe that is in the best interest of the Jericho School District. But I think as the leader in this state, we need to nominate someone and put someone forward for the Area 11 Director.
I would agree,
but-
we need to nominate somebody, I totally disagree that I don't think it's in the best interest of the Jericho School District.
Okay,
I would never consciously or intentionally make a decision that would be disservice to Jericho.
I didn't say it's a disservice, I said it's not
Well, if I'm making a decision, excuse me, if I'm making a decision that I know or people believe to be, not in the best interest of the Jericho School District, I'm doing a disservice to Jericho School District, and I've sworn to be of service and have the Jericho School District as our first interest. Again, it's our opinion. I mean,
Of
Ms.
course.
Marchand looks like a lovely person. Again,
Lovely person,
I wouldn't know her if I walked past her in a store. Same goes for the other two candidates. Again, I'm doing what I believe is in the best interest of Jericho schools. Again, none of these candidates, to the best of our knowledge, have any attributes that are anything less than impressive. So really, we're just going based off, other than Jen, who knows Ms. Marchand personally, and I totally respect her opinion, but, just based upon the information that we've been presented with and what the candidates have sent us, and, again, you put together a nice little summary sheet, Sam, again, thank you. I do believe that, the decision that we make, whatever that decision may be, is in the best interest of Jericho schools. The fact that we're even here this morning,
Yeah,
talking
absolutely.
about this is in the best interest of Jericho schools. We could have easily just said, you know what, we're not gonna nominate somebody.
And unfortunately, I think what you just said just convinced me to vote for Ms. Desiree.
Okay, that's fine, maybe, Sam, that's okay.
No, I know it is. I like I said, I wanted us to reach a decision, and with your speech about the best interest of the Jericho School District, not knowing what the votes look like, maybe our vote would put someone over who and would shift the vote.
If you
to
don't
Ms.
believe it's in
Desiree.
the best interest of Jericho schools, I would implore you not to vote for her.
No, there
Again,
are
I
other
have no
interests.
vested interest in
Neither do I.
any of these candidates.
Okay, I think so. Let's just do it on the final vote and see where we stand.
Okay. So, in favor of Miss Margaret Marchand? All in favor of, Ms. Charmise Desiree?
I guess we're not moving.
I guess we will.
Apologies to both, and good luck to both
Yeah,
candidates.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody's gonna do it.
Really,
Yeah, wishing you all the
Great
best.
job.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess at this point, we have a motion to adjourn,
Motion.
second?
Okay.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank
I just
you.
want to thank the board for meeting this morning instead of tomorrow night. I'm one of 6 superintendents